The battle that should never have been won. It was the fall of 1415. Rain pelted the countryside of northern France, soaking the earth until it became a thick, clinging mud. The fields were gray and miserable, and the skies hung heavy with clouds. In the midst of this grim landscape marched a tired English army, led by a young but resolute King Henry V. His goal had been simple: to assert his claim to the French crown and strike a decisive blow in the long and bloody conflict known as the 100 Years' War. But now, faced with starvation, disease, and an overwhelmingly larger French army, that ambition seemed all but crushed. Henry's forces, numbering around 6,000, had already endured a punishing siege at Harfleur and a long march across hostile territory. Many were ill, some with dysentery, and morale was stretched thin. Supplies were running low. The troops were a mixture of seasoned archers, lightly armored infantry, and a corps of noblemen and knights. They were tired, hungry, and in enemy land, surrounded by towns and fortresses loyal to the French crown. They knew they were being watched, and worse, they knew they were being hunted. In contrast, the French army was vast, possibly 25,000 strong, composed of heavily armored knights, noblemen from across France, and well-equipped cavalry. They were confident in their strength. They believed that Henry's army, cut off, outnumbered, and weakened, could be cornered and annihilated. To them, this wasn't just a battle. It was a chance to end England's ambitions on French soil once and for all. Many of France's most prestigious lords were present, each eager to claim glory in what they thought would be an easy victory. By mid-October, the French had managed to block Henry's route to the safety of Calais. The English were trapped. There was nowhere to run. With retreat impossible and the French demanding battle, Henry made the boldest decision of his campaign. He chose to stand and fight. Not in a fortified town, not behind castle walls, but in the open field of Agincourt. It was a desperate gamble. The terrain, however, was to be his unexpected ally. The battlefield at Agincourt was narrow and enclosed by thick woodland on both sides. The ground had been drenched by days of rain, making it soft, slippery, and treacherous. The French assembled in 3 massive divisions, shoulder to shoulder, ready to charge. But this tight formation in such a narrow, muddy space would prove to be a fatal flaw. Henry, a shrewd and disciplined commander, immediately saw how to use it against them. He positioned his men strategically, dismounted men-at-arms at the center and longbowmen on both flanks. To protect the archers from cavalry, he ordered rows of sharpened wooden stakes called palings driven into the ground at an angle. These would skewer any horse that charged directly into them. Behind the stakes stood thousands of English longbowmen, most wearing light armor and armed with 6-foot bows, capable of firing deadly arrows with devastating speed. The English longbow had already earned its fearsome reputation in earlier battles. Like Crécy and Poitiers, but Agincourt would take it to legendary status. These archers could shoot up to 12 arrows a minute, and their missiles could pierce armor at close range. Each archer carried hundreds of arrows, and they had no shortage of targets. The French, meanwhile, delayed their attack. Confident of their advantage, they expected Henry to surrender or retreat. They underestimated both his desperation and his resolve. As dawn broke on October 25th, St. Crispin's Day, the English stood silently in the mud, waiting. Henry rode along the line, speaking to his men not as a king, but as one of them. His speech, immortalized later by Shakespeare, emphasized honor, unity, and the glory of standing together against the odds. When the French finally advanced, it was slow and disorganized. The mud sucked at their boots and horses. The weight of their armor made each step agonizing. As they moved closer, the English unleashed a storm. Arrows rained down, whistling through the air and slamming into the packed French lines. Horses reared and fell. Knights were knocked from their saddles before even reaching the enemy. The French vanguard tried to push forward, but the narrow field bottlenecked their momentum. Those at the front were trampled by those behind. Corpses piled up, the ground slick with blood and water. Still, the French tried to fight their way through. They reached the English lines and engaged in brutal hand-to-hand combat. But they were tired, disoriented, and bogged down by their own weight. The English, though fewer in number, were more agile and had better footing. Then came the most shocking part of the battle. As more French forces attempted to enter the melee, they were blocked by their own fallen comrades. The battlefield turned into a swamp of bodies. Knights drowned in mud, suffocated beneath piles of armor and flesh. The chaos spiraled. The English archers, running low on arrows, dropped their bows, grabbed swords and axes, and joined the fight. Directly, many were peasants, but they fought like warriors. At one point, a group of French knights managed to circle around and attack the English baggage train, possibly in search of loot or to kill non-combatants. Henry, fearing the French were regrouping or trying to rescue their captured nobles, made a brutal decision. He ordered many of the prisoners to be killed. It was an act that shocked even his own men, but Henry would not risk the tide turning. By the afternoon, the battle was over. The French army had crumbled. Their casualties were catastrophic. Thousands of their nobility lay dead or captured. The English, incredibly, had lost fewer than 600 men. Among the dead were some of France's most powerful nobles, dukes, counts, barons wiped out in a single morning. The scale of the disaster was unprecedented. News of the victory spread like wildfire. In England, it was seen as divine favor, a triumph of the just over the arrogant. Henry returned home a hero. Songs were written, plays performed, and legends born. But for France, it was a national trauma. The defeat at Agincourt didn't end the war, but it shattered morale and exposed deep divisions among the French elite. How had this happened? How had a small, exhausted, outnumbered army defeated one of the most powerful military forces in Europe? The answer lies in a combination of terrain, technology, leadership, and psychology. Henry's use of the muddy battlefield, his clever deployment of archers and stakes, and his ability to inspire loyalty and courage turned the tide. The French, in contrast, were overconfident, poorly coordinated, and fatally underestimated their opponent. Agincourt became more than just a battle, it became a symbol. It showed that discipline could defeat chaos, that strategy could triumph over strength, and that leadership could inspire men to achieve the impossible. It redefined medieval warfare and forced commanders across Europe to rethink the role of knights, archers, and terrain in future conflicts. Today, historians still study Agincourt for its lessons in military tactics and leadership. The battlefield remains a site of pilgrimage, and Henry V is remembered not just as a king, but as the man who won the unwinnable. His army didn't just survive, they reshaped history. And in doing so, they proved that even when all the odds are against you, victory is never out of reach.